Welcome back to the Mom and Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On our episode today, we are joined by Annette Cycon and Nelly Willis. I've been a fan of the work of Annette Cycon and Liz Friedman for a long time. They founded the nonprofit Mother Woman about 15 years ago, and that's where I first learned of their work. And Annette has specialized in group work for over 30 years. And in their Mother Woman program, they designed and trained peers and professionals in their unique trauma-informed support group model for moms. But in 2017, they founded GPS Group Peer Support to broaden the scope of their work to also include people struggling with addiction and recovery, newly arrived refugees, and first-generation college students, frontline workers, and many, many others. And GPS is now implemented in communities internationally and in 7 languages. And our other guest, Nelly Willis, has provided nationwide peer support in English and Spanish to families experiencing perinatal mood and anxiety disorders for more than 10 years. And she's been supporting people through services such as lactation, childbirth, doula, postpartum consultation, education, and support. And she ran the nonprofit organization Heart Sounds, serving perinatal, low-income Latina, and BIPOC mothers across southern Arizona. She's been with Group Peer Support for nearly 6 years, and she is now the program director, as well as being a GPS certified coach, support group facilitator, and master trainer both in English and Spanish. She's also worked closely with Postpartum Support International in a variety of ways, and also now works on the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline. What I love about the work that they're doing is that the type of group support that they have created and train other people to implement can be used in a wide variety of languages, environments. You don't have to be a therapist to conduct one of these groups. They've really formulated a powerful support for people to be used in so many ways. And there are not a lot of things like that can be used across populations, across languages, and that is consistently supportive to everyone who experiences it. And I think this is particularly useful for people who not only are therapists who want to provide a type of group support in their community, surely you can do that, but for people who aren't therapists who want to figure out a way to give back now that they've been through what they've been through, it can feel hard to do that, and it can feel like a barrier if you don't, have a therapy degree or you're not licensed to provide services in those ways. This is one way that people can and do give back within their own communities. So I'm really excited for you guys to learn about the GPS group model and hear about ways that it's being implemented, and maybe even stir up some ideas for you on how you might be able to use this support in your own community. So let's meet Annette and Nelly. Welcome, Annette and Nelly. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. Thanks.
Fantastic. I'm really excited to talk with you. Annette, this is a long time coming. I feel like we should have had multiple chats by now. So I finally got on the ball, and I'm excited to have you here to talk a little bit about GPS, the beginning of GPS and how and why it was started. And we can start there and then get into a little bit more about what the program is all about.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Well, thanks again for having me, Kat. And I'm so happy that Nelly's here too. She's the program director at GPS. So, and a dear, dear friend. So I'm so happy that we're doing this together. So I'm Annette Cycon, and I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker for 36 years, kind of
Nice.
crazy, with a focus on child and family, support. And over the many, many years of doing that work, and in my own life as a mom, I really recognize that we have to support the mothers. It was so often that it was the moms who were bringing children into the outpatient clinic where I worked, and in the outpatient therapy that we were doing, outreach therapy, we were mostly talking to the mothers. And I also knew that in my own life, when I became a mom, it was way harder than I expected it to be. And I didn't have a postpartum emotional challenges with my first child, but with my second child, I had a 2.5-year-old. It was January in New England.
Yikes. Yep.
It was 20 below zero. We had 4 feet of snow and all these other kinds of things. And there are a lot of photographs of me sitting on the couch, just kind of deadpan, holding the baby like this. So at the time, though, in the early 90s, nobody was really talking about this. So I started an organization with Liz Friedman, who's the other co-founder of GPS. We started a nonprofit called Mother Woman. So for about 15 years, we led this nonprofit from a tiny little support group in one community center in Northampton, Massachusetts, to an organization that, again, had national impact because the awareness around perinatal emotional complications was just growing and growing and growing, largely thanks to PSI, Postpartum Support International. And so we started running a lot of groups and realized that if this is going to spread to the communities where it's really needed the most, then we need to train the people inside the community. First of all, we need to train people how to run support groups, because it's not as easy as you think. It's like, oh, let's just get a bunch of women together and talk. It's not all there is to it. I'll talk more about that.
Yes.
And if we want to reach people in other towns and other communities and under other, nationalities and heritage and race and so forth, then we have to train those people to run groups in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods, because that's where people go for support. So Liz and I started doing a lot of that. So we did a lot of training in Washington State with Postpartum Perinatal Support Washington. We trained with Dignity Health in California and with all kinds of perinatal support task forces and stuff like that around the country, because peer support is one of the foundations of treatment, for perinatal emotional complications, or PMADs, however people want to speak about that. And we've just had this really strong clinical belief in training people in how to run the best support group they can possibly run. And so over time, in about 2017, Liz and I were like, when we're running these trainings for people who serve mothers, not everybody identifies as a mother, and not everybody identifies as a woman. So we have to, change our focus. And we thought, what better word than GPS, group peer support? It's kind of like, how do you get from here to there? And whatever vehicle you're driving in, whether it's a Chevy or a bike or a bus or a whatever, we're all still really needing directional signs to help us get from where we are to where we want to be. And so we started working with people in recovery from substance abuse and addiction, and refugees, and all kinds of other communities, high schools and first generation college students, because we know that peer support is so crucial to transitions of any kind.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that history. I first knew you through Mother Woman.
That's right.
And have, seen the growth of GPS and experienced a little bit myself. I think you had come to LA. I don't know, however long ago that was.
Yep.
And experienced a bit of the GPS process myself in that room, and it was, and we'll get a little bit more into what the program, the structure is, but what I would like to, I guess you probably hear this all the time, and both of you hear this all the time. People don't know what to make of groups and group support, and some people might even feel a little hesitant. Oh, do I want to share? So maybe if you could speak to the benefits of a group support and peer support specifically, why would somebody seek something like that out?
I want to pass this question over to my friend Nelly.
Thank you, Annette. Well, I want to respond to that question by sharing a little bit of my experience as a Latina, as somebody who was raised in a community where asking for help and receiving help, it's actually not allowed or something that you grow up not learning or practicing.
Right.
So as an immigrant from Mexico, I came to this country alone, without family, with no money, with only dreams in my backpack. And of course, I had to contain my emotions to survive because I came here alone to go to school. And I avoided being vulnerable, and I avoided, just showing any sign of weakness. Back in the day, I thought, just showing emotions was weakness. So I never asked for help. So I had my first child as a Latina mother, where I was expected to know it all and have it all figured out on my own, because that's a cultural message that I carried for a long time. I experienced PMITs. I couldn't really talk about it. I was not having a good time. I experienced that feeling lonely and isolated while you have people around. It's maybe one of the worst feelings
Right.
that a new mother experiences. So
Yeah.
the stigma and the shame of not being happy or not being in love with my baby actually stopped me from asking for help. So the way that I healed, because I was already working in the ER as a practical nurse, and I just became a lactation consultant because I couldn't breastfeed my baby. So I was like, okay, I'm going to become the support that I never had and that I wasn't brave enough to seek. So I can be that support to the people who have no voice, like I do. And in that moment, I thought I had no voice. So I became a lactation consultant. I became a lot of things. I became a volunteer of PSI, the helpline in my state. I had been a bilingual counselor for 11 years for moms in the perinatal stage. And I started running groups, and I was like, okay, people may not come because my groups are going to be for Latinas run by a Latina, because I know the feeling. We need the help. We are hungry for
Yeah.
that help, to feel seen and listened to and validated, and someone just to say, I get you, instead of saying,
Definitely.
oh, just tough it up, get up and keep going. No, or somebody saying, I may know what you're feeling, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that mirror effect, the boomerang effect that a support group can provide to people, although the benefits, responding to your question now, I think that the benefits are going into a support group that is run by somebody from your community, that's somebody who looks like you, that's somebody who sounds like you, or that may understand the cultural context and the stigmas and everything that we know to be truth from our communities. Someone who understands that we may be experiencing collective trauma,
Right.
therefore we heal in community, we learn in community, we seek for support in community. I think the benefits of group peer support is that group peer support has been community co-created. It's actually community directed to the community. It's universal, and it's very easy to adapt to any population. So the benefits are many. I mean, I keep saying my story. The first time that I came to a support group, I was struggling with postpartum OCD. This was after my son was in and out of the hospital for over a year, 8 surgeries in less than 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
And he was just in the PICU, in and out of the PICU. And that's when I listened to your podcast too, before I came to GPS. So on my first GPS training, I was already running groups for Latinas with what I knew, the tools that I had, which weren't many. Now I know that I don't know how I was doing that. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no GPS. I had no structure at all, but people were coming. I was the director of a nonprofit providing support to BIPOC parents, low-income parents in my state in Arizona. And I experienced what I call the Latina liberation that day. The first time I sat in a group, a GPS group, I was able to admit that I was having intrusive thoughts, that I was having suicidal thoughts, that I was struggling so much with what was happening to my son that I couldn't really accept it. I couldn't let go of things. I wanted to fix things on my own. And that day I was like, oh my gosh, I felt so much lighter. I felt seen. I felt validated. Nobody tried to fix me. Nobody tried to rescue me. Nobody tried to say, oh, honey, don't feel that way.
Uh-huh.
It's not a big deal, or whatever we say, to make someone feel better. So for
Right.
me, for somebody who couldn't really ask for help or didn't know how to receive help, the group peer support changed my life on the first group. And
Wow.
transformation just keeps happening. I mean, every time a facilitator runs a group, we don't only see the transformation in the participants, but we also see the transformation in us as facilitators. It's a boomerang effect. You give and you receive so much on every group with the GPS model.
That's amazing. And thank you for sharing that part of your story also. I'm sure that so many people who are listening can identify with that to some extent, that feeling of feeling freedom, of being seen and heard. I think it's one of our most base needs, is to be seen and heard. And it is hard when you're struggling to be vulnerable, to be in a vulnerable space, and to try and get the help that you need. It's really hard. Thank you for your really powerful story. And how beautiful is it that this group model? I love how you described it, the boomerang effect, and that it. What I really like about what you're saying is it's not just some like talking head. I'm that you're at the front of a classroom and you're just telling people what to do and how to feel and when to talk. It sounds like you were saying, the collective is both involved and healed,
Yeah. Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what the training is all about, because it takes training to know how to hold a group dynamic. Say you have 5 or 10 or 8 people in the room during that perinatal period. Each one of them is coming in with their own story, their own background, their own culture, their own current lived experience, and their own challenges, and mental health issues and marital issues and, financially. I mean, there's just
Right.
so much, right? And how do we hold a space that invites everyone to be whole and
Yeah.
invites me as the facilitator to be able to know that I have a tool that I can use. I have a structure that I can lean into, because it's anxiety producing to try to hold a group and you don't have a tool. It's like driving a car without driver's ed or any kind of manual. It's like, here, get behind the wheel of a car, you'll be fine. And we don't do that. And so to me, it's kind of the same thing with running a support group, particularly for a vulnerable population. It's like, I would never send a vulnerable postpartum mom to a counselor who had no training at all, or who only experience they ever had with their own personal healing.
Right.
That's really important to have shared lived experience. But I think as a clinician, I've always been just really, really cautious and really, really deliberate about wanting to create spaces where people are not harmed,
Right.
where people feel courageous. We can't guarantee safety, right? We've moved on from that word to speak about creating a brave space where, maybe 3 women aren't really comfortable speaking yet, but the fourth woman is. And so she's going to say what the first 3 women weren't capable of saying in that moment. And then the first 3 women are also feel heard and validated. And that moves around the room. And I, as the facilitator, have the honor and the privilege of holding that. But also the relief, frankly, of having a structure to follow. And that's
Well,
sort of
yeah.
that boomerang effect too, because now I get to have a powerful experience myself.
Absolutely. And I mean, speaking to the structure without going into all the details yet, I think the structure is super important because in any group, you don't know what's going to come up, and you don't know what people are dealing with while they're in there or what they're
Mhm.
walking into the room with. Uh, and as a facilitator, conductor of sorts, right, if you don't have anything that can hold you, it's much harder to hold the group as well.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
And the
that
GPS model structure comes along with a sequence that for me is the secret sauce. Well, we have many secret sauces according to my perception, of course. I'm like, okay, like the whole thing is just fascinating when you dive into it. But the structure and the sequence that are very, very trauma informed. And we really teach people how to listen, how to hold spaces where they don't have to feel or have the responsibility to actually hold the group emotionally. We teach them those tools that we don't learn in school. We maybe
true.
don't learn them when we're growing up. I'm Mexican, so I didn't know how to listen. I confess myself with Annette so many times. I my love language was interrupting and just trying to fix people, right? I was listening to people thinking, how can I fix the life of this woman? How can I provide the magic words so this woman feels better today and stops crying or stops suffering? Or, I'm like, I may have the answer. If I don't have it, I'll look it up. And now I'm like, I'm just listening
Mm-hmm.
and providing this, practicing reflective listening, actually listening and just realizing that most of us as human beings, we only need to be listened to and validated. We may not even need advice. We may not even be asking for advice. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's not only the structure, but the sequence and the trauma informed aspect of the whole model. It's what makes this model so unique that we know it equalizes everyone. As the facilitators, we are the same as the participants. We all became one. We all became the group. We're at the same level, so everybody checks in, and we teach them how and why we do every single thing that we do here in our group, so people kind of know what to expect because we give them notice. Like nothing comes as a surprise, so it's very gentle and it's very, I don't know. I think it's just easy to drive. Going back to Annette's example, we really give them a GPS and step-by-step instructions on how to get on the car and actually drive.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, this in terms of group support models or support group models in general, this is a big part of the uniqueness of GPS. Um, for
Yeah.
one, a lot of groups are kind of top down a bit, like you all are coming here for help, and I'm, gonna facilitate that. Um, uh, but the feeling of community, I think you were alluding to it earlier, is part of not only what it makes it unique, but also what makes it available to everyone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Different
The-
cultures, different backgrounds. You mentioned people who are refugees. Um, yeah, can you say a little bit more, I guess, in part to the uniqueness of the model, and say a little bit more about um, like what how the group runs. You were alluding to it a little bit, but I think it would be good for people to understand in a little more detail.
Sure. Sure. Do you mind if I do that, Nelly?
yeah, please go ahead.
And then you can please interrupt. I love your love language. It's how we
No,
talk.
no, it's well controlled now. It's yeah.
So you know how one of the group models that has taken our culture by storm over this past century is AA, right?
Mm-hmm.
AA was started in the early 1900s. I think it was 1920 something or whatever. Ed wrote the big book. And I've done a lot of work with people in recovery over many years, clinically and in groups and so forth. And the thing that's really wonderful about AA is that if you go to an AA group in Rochester, New York, and you go to an AA group in Tucson, Arizona, or in Bend, Oregon, it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same structure. So that to me is one of the most trauma-informed elements of any kind of group. So somebody who needs a group can go to something they've never been to before, never been to that town, but they need that group that night, right? We've heard this from our people who are in recovery, and they know what they're going to get. That's why they go. And the healing that has happened, the transformation that's happened in the recovery field because of AA and that model. So in many ways, GPS is exactly the same, where wherever you take a GPS group, whether it's in Tampa, Florida, or with Nelly, or in English, or in Afghani, or in Chinese, in Mandarin, or English, it's going to follow the same routine because we developed that routine. And we know over all these many years that you always get the same outcome, which is fantastic, right? So here's the secret sauce. This is the recipe. It's kind of like chicken soup, right? First you do this and then you do this. So we start out, and every element is trauma. We start out with a moment of mindfulness. We call it the mindfulness rest stop. It's not meditation. It's not mindfulness. If people are just like, whoa, man, that's way too woo-woo for me. I'm not into yoga. I don't do that sort of thing. You know, all of that. We have a way that we have created and lead so that it's adaptable and that it's accessible and people aren't just sitting there like breathing to themselves and wondering when the hell this is going to be over, right? That's not, you know, you try to do mindfulness with a bunch of teenagers, like forget it, right? So we teach people how to do this mindfulness rest stop, and it's a process, only lasts a few minutes, but it's a process that begins every group where people start to learn how to regulate their nervous system. Right?
That's so important.
So we teach people in the facilitator training, we teach them about the basic tenets of mindfulness-based stress reduction. We teach them about polyvagal theory, the vagus nerve, that when we take a deep breath, it automatically stimulates our parasympathetic nervous system and starts to help our bodies to slow down and relax, even if we're not like trying to, right? It's not meditation, right? So we start out with that. So people just come in, you know, they could be coming in agitated. They could be coming in on their phone. There's, you know, right? We all do that. But it's a moment to be like, okay, let's just take it down and get into our space right here, you know, with whatever people bring, right? It could be that they're still anxious. I'm not attached to the outcome. You know, I just want people to be present in that moment. And then we talk about our guidelines. And talk about secret sauce. Our guidelines are really unique, and we spend time in every group talking about them. They're not rules. We don't put them on the wall. They don't go like this. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't interrupt. Don't crosstalk. We actually talk about confidentiality for a good 10 minutes, if you can believe that. Because there are many, many people, if someone hasn't had the experience in their personal life of having had their boundaries respected, of having had their own confidentiality respected, of, you know, of living in a community where gossip happens all the time and so forth, and among women, right? We have this sort of culture, you know, we're breaking through cultures of competition and all these different kinds of things. So we talk a lot about how confidentiality is a skill we learn how to build because it's how we start to build trust. So that's just one example. We talk about the power of setting boundaries and saying no, and we have, you know, and then all the other guidelines. And so we use each opportunity for each guideline, the one about advice, the one about interruption, and one about strong emotions. And it's what we're doing is not just helping people to figure out how you want them to behave while we're together for this next hour and a half, but we're actually teaching people about emotional intelligence, about themselves, right? And it's done, quickly. It's not like laborious and boring. All this kind of stuff. But it's part of what we train people in how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the thing that helps people to really feel like, okay, I'm safe here. Like I could, if I want to, I could say that thing here.
Right.
And then we talk about the realities of the life we live. So we start to do a little bit more where we're like, and if we're a postpartum mom, and we start to talk about the realities of that, right? So the realities is that, we may not be sleeping, we may not be, having sex. We may even be having scary thoughts. We start bringing up the hard stuff first. As the facilitators, we say the hard thing first, or the taboo thing first. And then that also gives people permission. It's like, oh, I can talk about that here. Oh, okay. This isn't one of those kind of groups where I'm going to just talk about poop and,
Right.
like things like that. Like
Yeah.
this is a place where I get to be real. And
there's so few places to do that.
Exactly. That's exactly right. There are so few places where you can come in and say, I don't feel connected to my baby. Last night, I was this close to whatever. We don't talk about that in public.
Right.
When people ask you how you are, they want to hear, I'm fine. How's the baby? He's great.
Right.
Right. But we need a place to go. And if we're gonna invite people to say the hard thing, then we need to be prepared for that. And then the check-in comes and people say the hard thing. And it's okay, because then the other person here is like, oh, she's got intrusive thoughts too, or she isn't connecting to her baby either, or all of these taboos and things that we think we're the only one.
Right.
And it's held in a container. And like Nelly said, the facilitator's job is not to fix it. The facilitator's job is not to say, okay, so here are all the resources you can use. Watch this, watch that, do this. We're just holding it. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's super powerful.
And it's powerful. Yeah, of course, if someone is in crisis, if someone needs more, if someone asks us for resources, we have them. And we will talk to people after group if we're concerned about something. But it's not a therapy group. But it's therapeutic. And it's not only a support, it's not a generic kind of support group. It's a place where people learn a lot.
Right.
And offload a lot. And it's also really, don't you think, Nelly? Tell me what you think about this. Isn't it powerful to watch other people grow? Like, that's the other cool thing. Is that when you're in a group of 6 or 7 women and you're watching someone week by week, their transformation, their strength, their ability, it's like to watch it, to be witness to it. From the group members' point of view, it's like, she can do it, I can do it.
It's like going to the gym with somebody, which I don't do, but going to the gym with somebody and seeing how they're working on those resilience muscles, those muscles, those strengths. And so I actually have an example for that, and I share that over and over everywhere I go, because I had an existing group of Latina mothers, and I also work with refugees and immigrants here because I'm an hour away from the border with Mexico. And I remember how the impact of one group looked like. I got to witness that and see how much they shared and how much they opened up in comparison to previous groups. And as we went along with the group, because we kept the group for years, it was very consistent and very, very, I don't know, I feel like a family, because they really got closer, because they were sharing a lot of things that they weren't able to share before.
Right.
And you can just see them physically, emotionally, and mentally, how they share things, and how, how they all the things they learned as participants in the support group, like setting boundaries and confidentiality and listening, because listening is the key. That's what we keep telling people in our trainings and groups. And they were coming back saying, Nelly, I actually listened to my husband, and my relationship, it's been renovated. I'm like, oh yeah, you should ask my husband and he can tell you all about it. He has a review for GPS, by the way. So, like I didn't interrupt my teenager, and she was actually able to say a lot more than before. So all these skills that they actually learn and apply in their personal lives and how they
Mhm.
manage things that come their way, because we will always be going through something, right? As mothers, we face new realities every day. In life, it's going to just keep getting challenging as babies grow, challenges grow as well, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Wait.
and speaking out loud about their challenges and feelings and the stigma, I think that's what breaks the shame. Speaking
Mhm.
out loud about what's really bothering you, what's really hurting you, and that's the liberation I'm describing. That's what I think that breaks with the shame. That they were able to speak out loud about what they were feeling. Sometimes they don't even need to speak about it again.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's all they needed. And they can move on and they can heal. So GPS really offers these spaces where people can heal and they can transform their feelings and their relationship with the feelings, which I think it's great.
Yeah, and I know that I mean you're now also offering this training for facilitators in Spanish, which is a huge deal, and we'll get to that in a moment. Um, uh, but just in terms of the impact that you guys are seeing on the perinatal population, the impact of having this kind of support on the perinatal population, but also people of color within the perinatal population. And I have a multi-layered kind of question comment. There, there are huge gaps in support and understanding and all of the things. Humility. How is it that, how are you seeing GPS filling those gaps?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head, Kat, which is that there's not enough high quality mental health care, particularly in communities of color. And there's not enough high quality mental health care led by providers who, as Nelly said, look like us, talk like us, eat like us, laugh like us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whose relationships with their mothers are are similar. Like culture is right is that's the love language, right? That's the foundation. And so it would be insane for me to run a group for a bunch of Black women in Houston, Texas. I could fudge it and I'm nice and everything and right? But it's not the same. Let's
Mm-hmm.
find who's the person that moms already go to in Houston,
Mm-hmm.
Texas. That's the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do moms already go? They
Mm-hmm.
go to church. So let's build capacity in the church. In the Latino and the Black churches, they're full to the brim. They're full to the brim because it's about community and about connection, and because it's about safety and it's about intergenerational connection, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
part of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's always the abuela or there's always the grandma who people can go to for safety, right? And there are a lot of churches and so forth that already run small groups. Let's build a capacity in the places where people already go because there
Mm-hmm.
isn't enough mental health capacity. But let's train people so that they're providing as best of a mental health model as possible. That's adapted, of course, right? So if it's in church, include prayer, in the Afghan community, we were working with Afghan refugees last year. We're doing it again right now, which is really incredible. The women were coming together and they were cooking because that's what they do. That's the culture. So it's like, bring the women together. Let's cook, let's make a meal, and let's sit down. And that's when we start to talk. Right.
I love that.
And the facilitator has learned these things, and then she gets to adapt it. She gets to say, okay, what's the way that I can say this in a way that's culturally relevant? I remember one time, this was hysterical, and Nelly, you know this guy, Omar Delgado from Springfield, Massachusetts, this charming Latino guy who runs a program, a residential men's program for recovery. So he and his coworker come in because they're being paid by the, Department of Public Health. So they come to this training for free. Okay, terrific. They learn GPS. They're like, hey, this sounds really cool. But they're like, this is too touchy-feely for our guys. Like, our guys are tough. Like, they're from the street. Like, they're not going to go for all this woo-woo, talk about our feelings thing. And we're like, okay, all right, well, so tell us what happened. Try it out, adapt it, teach us about what works. Nelly's shaking her head. They came back and they were like, I can't believe it. These guys loved it.
That's great.
Not only that, it started out with like 5 guys because, there'd be I'm in this program, don't really want to be here. I'm here on probation, whatever, right? There's a lot of resistance. These guys are like running to group. It's the funniest thing. And they're like, they love the mindfulness rest stop. They loved talking about the guidelines. Not only that, but when new men come into the program, they're telling them how they want them to behave in the program. And I'm like, whoa. And this whole thing is in Espanol too. Like the whole thing is in Spanish. And, so I'm just like,
well,
wow.
You've thread a needle in the sense of creating something that's both structured and flexible at the same time. I mean, it's incredible that it can adapt. The model can adapt and still like have the same feel as you're describing. That everywhere you go, it's you know what to expect. That
And the
is
same
incredibly
trauma
hard to do.
And same trauma informed elements, right? So that whether you're a guy at this residential place in Springfield, or you're a woman in Houston, or you're somebody someplace else, it has that same container that feels like, okay, I can let my hair down here. I can say the hard thing and I can heal from my experience. That's sometimes the outcome is, wow, I really need therapy. Sometimes the outcome is, I'm more depressed than I thought. This isn't just me. I'm actually struggling with a mental health issue and I need a consult. Like, that's fine. Like, we're not against like mental health care by any means. It's like, yeah. But sometimes people don't get there because they stay isolated and they don't realize that it's a common experience,
Right. And so, kind of
I
going
say something, Nelly. I see you opening your mouth.
Oh, go ahead.
Talking about Omar or something. I don't know.
So I just wanted to add a little more about the gaps that GPS has filled in the past and the ones that we know that GPS can fill, especially in the perinatal mental health system. As an advocate, as a volunteer, as a counselor, in the work that I do, not only in my community, but internationally now for the perinatal mental health field. What I know to be truth is that we may have some services available for people, some resources, but we are missing some pieces there. The most important pieces that we may be missing are trust, connection, offering a culturally sensitive service to the people. So GPS, it's not a replacement for therapy, it's not a replacement for medical care, but it's the bridge between the people and some of those existing resources that we may have. My community, my population, my people, my ladies are not going to go to a clinic the first day they feel depressed. They're not going to go to a doctor the first month. They will struggle for weeks and even months before they can even recognize that they need the help or that they can even come out of their homes and say, okay, I do need to talk to somebody, or I need to go somewhere, or maybe I need to just be around other moms at a group. But I believe that support groups are the frontline resource and maybe the first stop for a mom that doesn't even know what's going on with her emotions. So
Right.
for me, GPS is filling those gaps. We are also recognizing people from the communities, not only moms and peers, but some of the participants who come to our groups. They don't come to our trainings, they come to our groups to receive support. They healed and they got so much empowerment that they're like, after months, they're like, Nelly, can I take this training? Now I want to be a support group facilitator. Now I want to have a support group on my own and I want to help. So other people. So we actually help people to recognize their own strengths. Even if they don't have those letters after their names, they don't have a PhD, they're not medical providers, but they are part of the community and they become peers. I think that peers are a very important aspect and they need the training because as we know, peers are people from the community. There may be survivors, there may be somebody who had supported somebody else struggling with PMITs and they need the training. So those gaps are being filled by GPS. We are training people from the community. We are training people from the refugees. We are training people in the border. We are training people in these communities that need the support. So we also train providers. We also train people that have a lot of experience. But I think that the consistency, the structure, and the sequence that we teach to people are skills that can even protect people who are providing support out there. We are providing support with no tools, no skills. We are putting people at risk and we are putting ourselves at risk by not having the right training. So that's a gap that GPS has been able to fill successfully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really am I'm glad also that you brought the point in that you don't have to be some kind of mental health professional specifically or have some degrees or whatever in order to be a support in your community. Because I don't know, there's just like with the power structures and hierarchy of things like that, especially in the medical system, it could feel like that's not available to people. But I hear you loud and clear that how important it is to have people within the community that are already connected be the person who is supporting the community.
Right.
And of course, they won't have all the knowledge and the skills that a medical provider will have, but they can be the connection. They can be the bridge from those mothers, those parents, those families that are struggling to the medical care, to to a therapist, to a specialist. And that way peers can refer people or bring people directly to the right support. I think that's the gap that trained peers can fill in our communities. Not only, and this is not uniquely for the Hispanic community, the refugee, I think it's universal. That's just universal. We should work as a team and we should collaborate as a team, in the community, and that's how we can get those gaps filled. Of course,
Sure.
with the right skills and training. But
Well, yeah, and I was just thinking about that right at the end, what you were saying, that if people wanted to become that support, the whole wide range is available from someone who's in their community and a parent who wants to support other parents, not necessarily a mental health professional, all the way to whoever on what a in whatever medical system or something that wants to have this training or bring it into their system. You guys are training everybody.
yeah.
It's not only available to these select few.
We're training everybody. We have a contract with the state of Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and they're implementing GPS groups in every single recovery and addiction support program across the state.
That's huge.
It's huge. We've been doing this now for 4 years. Every residential center, every rehab, every women's group, every community center, because GPS is easy to learn and then it's easy to implement. and the Department of Public Health loves it so much that they are using it in every group they run. Same thing in Perinatal Support Washington, run by, Mia Edidin and oh my goodness, I'm going to embarrass myself, but I've known Mia for 12 years or something like that. They are using GPS across the board, across all of their perinatal support groups, all of them. They train people, and that's the only model they use. We were working with the Montana Healthy Baby, Healthy Mother Coalition. We're going to be training people from the Maternal Mental Health Alliance in Wisconsin this fall. I mean,
I'm sure you guys have a better lay of the land than I do when it comes to what I'm going to ask you. But from my perspective, there's not a lot of training out there on how to run a support group. Not enough. And some of the ones that are out there are not as flexible as what you've created and designed. So just the fact that you're providing a training is a big deal. Because like even as therapists, we don't necessarily come out of school or whatever knowing how to run a group, knowing how to hold that space.
right.
And I mean, it's just like the more I'm understanding what you guys are doing, the more of just a massive gem this is.
Oh, thank you. Well, if I could just say something, which is that it's because we've been doing this for a long time, right? And so we're like, other people have got to be doing this too, right? Like, who are the other people who are doing what we're doing? And what we found is that other people are training curriculum-based support groups. So you learn the content, right? And you learn it in a couple of days. So the perinatal content, right? You learn symptoms, risk factors, coping, all kinds of really, really important stuff, but not the process of holding a trauma-informed space for 10 people who are coming in with all their own stuff, right? That's we don't train people in that. So to me, GPS is like building a house, right? It's like, it's the structure of the house. And then inside the house, you can build whatever you want, but you have the house. You got this, you've got the foundation, nice solid cement foundation or a slab. Then you got your timbers and you got your roof. You can paint it however you want. You can put as many rooms in it as ever you want. You can do whatever you want inside with that structure. And that's that uniqueness. So if you're running recovery groups, fantastic. If you're doing groups for, Ugandan genocide survivors, which we're about to train people from Uganda, it's yeah. So you're right. No, there isn't that much. And let alone hello in Spanish.
Right. Yes. Yes. Nelly, sorry. Yeah, Nelly, can you tell us more about the training and also the training in Spanish and how people can learn more?
Yeah, sure. So the training of GPS en Español it's a dream come true for me and for Annette and Liz. This training has been carefully adapted to the Latino population, not only from my country. We expanded our adaptability and inclusiveness to like the whole Latino population. Although this training is 100% in Spanish, led by Latino trainers. We have trainers from all over the world. We have trainers from Mexico, Puerto Rico, Argentina, El Salvador, Guatemala, Chile, and many more. I may be missing some countries. However, we also invite people from South America, especially that are volunteers from PSI that I'm connected to and that GPS is connected to. We bring those people who are volunteers and that we know that have big roles and big responsibilities supporting people with no training. So we fill those gaps. We actually also remind people that the skills that they learn in our trainings are not only to support people in a group setting, but in a one-on-one setting. We know that most people that are Latinos or immigrants, maybe, peers or working in a home visiting program or being in that front line, like I said before, where they are going to be the first ones going into a home or visiting a family to provide a service, like an early childhood service or something. And
Right.
they need the training, they need the skills, they need to know not only how to recognize when a parent needs help and what kind of help,
Mm.
but they need to know how to support somebody, how to,
Right.
manage what they're dealing with. This training is also, it's very interactive. We I know, Annette knows that Latinos learn in community because that's how we grow up, right? We grow up in groups, we grow up in family, we do everything in groups and in community collectively. So we try to incorporate a lot of interaction moments where we practice. It has a lot of hands-on practice. It's not only sitting down watching, two people talk. We have a lot of practice opportunities,
That's great.
examples. We actually tell them, the pro tips, like if you want your group to be successful, go to the library where in the neighborhood where the population that you're targeting lives. We speak about accessibility, how accessible you can make your support groups, which is maybe one of the barriers that people who have
Right.
resources out there may be having.
Right. For sure. So, what can other people understand or expect with the training?
So this is a training 100% in Spanish and Espanol. And we are not only inviting the people who identify themselves as Latinos or Hispanic, we also welcome and honor all the indigenous communities that live not only in the United States, but in Central and South America. Whoever speaks Spanish and can relate with the cultural content of our training is welcomed. We invite people throughout the world, the entire world. It's a training that is open to anyone who is in the field of providing peer support, providers, or anyone who would like to use their lived experience to support other people in their community. One of my dreams with this training was to offer a high quality training that in my country, which is Mexico, or in South America, Central and South America, we can't get. So that was one of my dreams, offering a very high quality training
Mm-hmm.
for my community, my population, um, that they can't get anywhere else.
Right.
So that's one of my main goals. And actually also remind people of what makes the GPS training, not only in English, but also in Spanish, trauma informed. The trauma informed aspect of our training is a very important component for all the people who are dedicated to provide perinatal mental health support out there. The GPS model is consistent, it's predictable, it's structured. We know that it's accessible, it's very easy to implement, it's 100% universal and adaptable. The guidelines are always consistent. You will always get and expect the same thing. The
Mm-hmm.
sequence is going to always be the same. We offer this protected opportunity for self-reflection, for people to recognize their own strengths. We integrate, like Annette mentioned before, we integrate the somatic grounding techniques and the polyvagal practice. And as we had already mentioned, this training is appropriate for, anyone who has the intention and the opportunity to support other people and to use their lived experience to support other people.
I know there are so many people, even clients I've had personally, but other people who've been on the podcast, conversations I've overheard about how after people are kind of feeling better, how can they support other people who are going through things like this, and the kind of barrier, as you're saying, of people supporting other people is not having this kind of training or guidelines on how to support people in their community. It's it's so super powerful to want to help people after you've found your own healing. It's such a real and deep feeling, and that people don't have to have a million degrees in order to do this is huge, and automatically makes it accessible. I mean, I know there are people listening right now to this who have these thoughts. How do I get trained? How do I help people in my area? Let alone us therapists who don't get this training, which is wild.
We hear
But
that all the time.
it
I went
is,
to
Yeah,
social work school and grad school, and I didn't get this
it's ridiculous.
in-depth training. I've heard people say this should be part of,
Yeah.
college curriculums and
Yeah.
things like that. So there are more dreams to be manifest in the future. But in the meantime, because the training is online, it's virtual, people can join from anywhere, and that's a big advantage. And the training itself is only 2.5 hours. Each module is 2.5 hour class, and it takes place over several days in a month, right? So I won't get into the details of that. You'll find that out if you register and learn more about the group. But again, we're trying to make it accessible
Mm-hmm.
to the people who are also wanting to participate, to get
Right.
trained. So our the training in English typically happens in the fall and in the spring. It's October right now. Our training is going to take place in mid-October into early November of 2023, and then again in English in 2024. And the Spanish training will take place in February of 2024. And Nelly can tell you all about, we have some free webinars where people can learn more about us in 1 hour, little bites, so that they can hear from what, or ask questions personally.
Great.
we also offer some free and online support groups on our website that we can share as well. But I just wanted to say to whoever may be listening right now that running groups or providing peer support after you feel the intention to support somebody with your lived experience may also be part of your healing process. So I invite you all out there that if you are still trying to find a purpose for anything you survived, anything you're going through, anything you had already healed or are healing, this is a great opportunity for you to give, to have a meaningful closing meaning to what you have survived. I mean, it's a great way. Every time I run groups,
Mm.
I continue to heal. Every time I listen to a mom who is going through something I went through, or who is going through something, struggling with something with their babies or with PMEDs, I continue to heal. And I invite you all to find, that training, that purpose in your lives, and take trainings like this, trainings that are trauma informed, trainings are not going to take a lot from you, trainings are going to teach you how to listen, how to support people, and how to use your own lived experience and recognize your own strengths. You may not need those letters after your name because you may have what it takes to be a great, you know, um, peer support leader or peer support group facilitator. And of course, we welcome all providers and professionals as well because we have trained a lot in English and Spanish.
We're also engaged in research. We are working on developing an evidence base, and we're very close. We've been doing research for many, many years with research institutions, universities, social work departments, and soon to be with NIH, because we believe
It's a
so
big deal.
strongly. It's a very big deal. There's very little evidence-based research on support groups because there are no consistent models, and you can't do a control and so forth. So we're really dedicated to that. And so people who are interested, who are listening, who might be research people or fascinated with that aspect of building capacity it's really about building greater capacity to serve greater amounts of people. They can contact us too to engage in research.
Fantastic. I'm so excited about what you're offering, and it's really a service you're providing as well. Just so many people need this kind of support, and I'm glad that we were able to walk through what this is and how people can access it, because that in and of itself is a barrier, not even knowing that this is available. So thank you for coming on and sharing all of this with us.
Thank you.
You.
Please get connected with Group Peer Support at grouppeersupport.org, and they're also on Facebook at Group Peer Support. And join me for the new podcast series within Mom and Mind called Behind the Sessions. There are new episodes every other Thursday where we dive into therapy topics, things that people bring into therapy that I wish really everybody could hear about, because these issues, these problems, these challenges are really quite universal in the perinatal experience, and in the reproductive mental health experience. It's just, we all feel so isolated when we're feeling bad. And it's hard to know that the things we feel are also the things that other people experience. So I'm here to break down the stigma and share with you as many things as I can about what comes up in therapy in the series Behind the Sessions. Thanks so much for being with us. Until next time.